All right, everybody, let's get into it. We're going to be looking at firearms and their properties, how it will influence your game playing D&D. I have actually run 3 mini campaigns in a Western setting, which I call Devil's Dice. And I've done that same campaign 3 times, slightly differently, but it gave me a taste on how firearms affect the game. And so I'm sharing this information with you today, and let's get into it. Okay, so firearms are entirely optional, and if you want them in your game, you're going to have to talk to the DM. If you are the DM, then you probably also need to talk to the players to just make sure that everybody's on board, because some people, if they want to play more of a barbarian or, medieval or even dark ages or stone age, it's not going to really fit. But they are an interesting thing to add. And if you want to add Renaissance weapons, it doesn't affect the game that much. But we'll see that the Dungeon Master's Guide says that you can introduce gunpowder weapons to your campaign that are associated with the Renaissance, and that modern and futuristic items could come from unusual sources like crashed spaceships and things like that, but they would be priceless. Getting proficiency in firearms is an unusual thing. So, on one level, if firearms are part of your world already, then they are martial weapons, and any character with martial weapon proficiency would have proficiency in firearms. However, if they are completely new to your world, no one will be proficient in them. So you may have to use the training rules to learn how to use them and have enough ammunition and things like that so you can make some mistakes, hopefully without shooting yourself in the foot or worse, in game, of course. So then the properties of firearms, they need ammunition, and some of them have burst fire and reload. The ammunition is destroyed upon use. It's a little bit different than archery in that bows and arrows and crossbow bolts can be repaired much more easily, whereas bullets and other ammunition need to be remade completely from scratch. Then again, Renaissance weapons require gunpowder and wadding and shot to be loaded in. So it's completely different things. And so ammunition deserves its own video, and I'll look at that in the future. But for now, we're just going to concentrate on the firearms themselves and how a gun battle may affect your game. So burst fire and reload. Burst fire, you can imagine like a machine gun or something like that. I remember rules for a shotgun with spray, and I couldn't find anything like that in the 5th edition. I'm going to be looking through some older rules and see if I can find more variations for things like shotguns or scatter guns, which I think would add a bit of flavour to the game. The reload is interesting. Basically, if you've got a shooter, you've got to reload it. But you'll see that there's different rules about that as we look a little bit deeper. Critical Role added some terrible rules, and thank goodness they're only optional and not official. They really they were sort of like using Pathfinder rules, and that included bullets or firearms being able to pierce armor more effectively, which is actually based on scientific fact. That's why armor fell out of use. D&D didn't take those rules for penetrating armor, but they did keep the Pathfinder's misfire rules, and they are terrible. The other problem that I find, and I also did this myself, is when you're quickly trying to find rules about firearms, they're not all in the same place. It's very scattered. It's very situational, depending on whether you're doing Renaissance or modern weapons. And so a lot of people, like myself included, went to the gunslinger subclass as a guide because it had a lot of stuff all together. But these rules are not the same as the stuff that's in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that's the problem, that you might find that within your group, everybody's looking at different rules, and it gets more confusing, and then the DM has to sort of step in to say what is what and make a ruling for every single rule, which is time consuming and requires a lot of outside of the game discussion. So just to compare the Dungeon Master's Guide with the Critical Role, we can have a look at Reload, which is the same thing, and confusingly it's called the same name. Whereas in Critical Role, you must spend an attack or one action to reload, and you must have one free hand. In the DMG, you use an action or a bonus action, and there's no mention of the free hand. So that leads me to wonder whether, using the DMG rules, does that mean that your gunslinger could hold a shield? That could be very useful. That would impact the game. Also, I think that the Critical Role does one thing right here, and that is they let you reload with a bonus action, and I think with an attack, which is good for a fighter that gets multiple attacks per action, whereas I think the DMG does it right by allowing you to do it during a bonus action. So something actually fusing these two together to make it an attack, an action, or a bonus action would be the way to go in my eyes. Let's have a look at loading. Basically, these rules exist for crossbows as well as blowguns and Renaissance firearms, and you can imagine the firearm enthusiast loading their musket, shoving down the gunpowder or putting it in the flash pan or whatever they have to do to load the actual flintlock or other musket that they have. So Critical Role doesn't use loading rules, mainly because their pistols have progressed beyond that sort of Renaissance level, and characters can need to really take feats like Crossbow Expert and Gunner to get around loading, and that's why really Gunner is the feat that you want if you want to explore firearms. I did find this interesting feat hidden away, not in my feats rules, but I bumped into it accidentally, and I think it is good if you're going to play the Critical Role gunslinger. If your DM is completely sold on Critical Role and they will not budge, then you really do need this feat to get rid of the misfire. And I would even maybe make your gunslinger a halfling, so you get the lucky feat, just to try to get rid of this god-awful misfire. To my mind, you're better off just to get rid of misfire. There's no other class really has the same level of critical failure like the gunslinger, and I just don't think it belongs in the game, especially since 5th edition is getting softer and, you know, nobody dies and nothing bad ever happens, unlike in previous editions. So the gunner, you want that feat. You can ignore the loading property of firearms. You can shoot within 5 foot of a hostile creature. All of those things are very useful. The +1 to dexterity is a bonus. Proficiency with firearms is good as well. So it's a way that you can get proficiency with firearms at first level and before you even need to get a gunslinger or some other kind of specialist subclass. The next thing you probably want to look at is Sharpshooter. I'm not completely sold on it. I mean, it is good in that you can shoot long range without the disadvantage. But you know, if that's probably the best part of it. If your DM likes to use cover and 3/4 cover, half cover, then that's going to help you out. But sometimes DMs don't. I'm not sure whether the third bullet point is as useful because it's the -5 penalty is quite big, and as you go up levels, you know, it's even more critical that you hit. I was thinking about athletics, and because what I found is when I was DMing games with firearms in them, that the characters naturally wanted to go prone and sort of shoot, and at the time I let them do that. But standing up after you're prone uses half of your movement. So this athlete feat helps by only taking 5 of your movement, as long as all of the other stuff, which makes your gunslinger, you know, sort of outdoorsy, sort of good. The +1 dexterity is good. Climbing is cool. Long jump, high jump might be useful situationally. Being prone is not optimal in 5th edition, and basically you have disadvantage on your attacks. Now, I didn't play those rules when I was using the prone rules because it didn't make sense to me, because if I get it in melee, it's difficult, and in some because, you know, in the military, snipers hunt, and even in recreational sports, hunters, they lie down. It actually does give you some stability to rest your weapon against a stable base. So it improves your shot, if anything. So I just thinking about it, I can see how some DMs have house ruled that you can shoot crossbows from a prone position. I would argue that they would have to be preloaded because a lot of crossbows, and especially heavy crossbows, require you to sort of stand up and reload it. You could say the same thing with Renaissance firearms because you have to stand up and load them and properly. But with a weapon like a rifle from modern times or Western times, or even a futuristic one, you don't need to do that. You just throw in a magazine or load the bullets. That's one of the advantages of having this smaller ammunition rather than arrows and bolts and you having, you know, the whole mechanism of firearms rather than how bows and crossbows work. I found this feat, and so basically I really like it. This is the link below. I'll put it in the description as well, but it basically says that you don't suffer disadvantage on range attacks when you are prone. That might be a little bit too general because that means you can also throw knives and stuff like that, but I guess why not? If that's it costs you a feat, so, you know, why not? And so I like it. So I think, you know, this could be one of the answers to this problem. We're going to talk about cover next time. We're running out of time for this one. If you like, and please subscribe and click on the notifications and leave a comment as well. I like to listen to what people are doing in their games and how they have tried to homebrew or house rule things.